Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Methodologies in Foucauldian Discourse Analysis. Exploring the methodologies used in Foucauldian discourse analysis reveals a sophisticated approach to understanding how power and knowledge are interwoven in shaping societal discourses. Michel Foucault's methodologies, including the genealogical method, discursive formations, the role of institutions, archaeological analysis, discursive practice analysis, and the analysis of power relations, provide a multifaceted framework for examining the dynamics that govern discourse and influence social realities. Each method offers a unique lens through which the complex relationships between language, power, and society can be understood and critiqued. This analysis delves into these methodologies to unpack the intricacies of Foucauldian discourse analysis, highlighting how they contribute to a deeper understanding of the historical and present-day societal structures. 1. Genealogical method. Michel Foucault's genealogical method is a key methodology within his broader philosophical project, particularly in his approach to discourse analysis. This method is deeply influenced by Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of genealogy and is employed by Foucault to explore the history and development of discourses, challenging the traditional narrative of a continuous and linear progression of knowledge. Instead, Foucault's genealogy seeks to uncover the discontinuities, breaks, and shifts that characterize the history of ideas, revealing how what we consider to be truth and knowledge is deeply entangled with power relations and has evolved over time. 1. Understanding the genealogical method. Genealogy, as used by Foucault, is not merely historical research. It is a form of effective history that emphasizes the discontinuities and ruptures in the historical record. It contrasts with traditional historical methods that often seek to find the origin or the continuous development of ideas, instead focusing on how certain practices, discourses, and institutions came to dominate and shape our understanding of truth. 2. Key features of Foucault's genealogical method. Counter-memory. Foucault's genealogy attempts to create a counter-memory, or counter-history, that serves as an antidote to the official, often sanitized versions of history that reinforce current power structures. This involves highlighting forgotten, marginalized, or suppressed episodes that can reveal the struggles and conflicts underlying the production of knowledge. Power and knowledge. Genealogy investigates the relationship between power and knowledge, focusing on how different power mechanisms influence the production of knowledge and vice versa. It looks at how knowledge systems are used to exert control and how power dynamics shape what is considered knowledge. Descent and emergence. Foucault's method involves tracing the descent of ideas, which means mapping out the lineage and transformation of discourses over time. He also focuses on emergence, or the points at which certain practices, discourses, or truths come into being, often as a result of conflicts or contests over power. Discursive and non-discursive practices. The genealogical approach examines both discursive practices, ways of thinking and speaking, and non-discursive practices, institutions, architectural styles, regulatory decisions, to understand how they interact to form a network that supports certain types of knowledge while excluding others. 3. Application of the genealogical method. In his studies, such as in Discipline and Punish, and the first volume of The History of Sexuality, Foucault applied the genealogical method to analyze how modern institutions, prisons, clinics, schools, and scientific knowledge about human sexuality were developed. These analyses reveal how power and knowledge intersect to control and define human bodies and behaviors. 4. Implications of the genealogical method. The genealogical method challenges us to question the foundations upon which modern institutions, social practices, and beliefs are built. It encourages a skeptical view of historical continuities and urges an examination of the historical forces and power relations that shape our present. This approach has been influential across various fields, including sociology, cultural studies, and critical theory, inspiring scholars to explore the historical underpinnings of other seemingly natural and unquestioned truths. Foucault's genealogical method provides a powerful tool for understanding how certain truths and practices come to dominate the cultural and social landscapes. By focusing on the discontinuities and ruptures in history, it exposes the contingent nature of what we take for granted as objective truth, demonstrating how our current understanding is shaped by historical struggles over power. This methodology not only deepens our understanding of the past but also offers critical insights into the present, challenging us to envision alternative ways of thinking and being. 2. Discursive formations. The concept of discursive formations is foundational in Michel Foucault's approach to discourse analysis, as detailed in his pivotal work, The Archaeology of Knowledge. This methodology is central to understanding how discourses function across different texts, institutions, and periods. Foucault's exploration of discursive formations offers a systematic way to examine how knowledge is organized, controlled, and distributed through language. Let's delve deeper into what discursive formations entail and how they are identified and analyzed. 1. Understanding discursive formations. Discursive formations are essentially the rules and systematic structures that define how certain topics, objects, subjects, and concepts are discussed in various texts and practices within a particular field of knowledge. Foucault was interested in uncovering how these formations govern what can be said, who can speak, the concepts used, and the strategies deployed within specific discourses. 2. Key features of discursive formations. The formation of objects. Foucault's methodology seeks to understand how discourses create and define their objects of study. For example, the medical discourse determines what is considered a disease, symptom, or cure. This involves identifying how discourses differentiate between what is relevant and what is not, and how they group together certain elements to form coherent objects. The formation of enunciative modalities. This aspect looks at the nature of the speaking subjects within discourses. Who is qualified to speak, under what conditions, what their statuses are, and how their credibility is established. In academic discourse, for instance, the enunciative modality might include being a researcher at an accredited institution. The formation of concepts. Foucault analyzes how discourses generate their own concepts and theories. This involves tracking the evolution of key ideas and how they are used to structure knowledge within the discourse. For example, psychoanalytic discourse utilizes specific concepts like the Oedipus complex, id, ego, and superego. The formation of strategies. This involves understanding the overarching aims and tactical decisions behind discourses. Strategies might include the ways discourses reinforce or challenge existing power structures, or how they integrate with or differentiate from other fields of knowledge. 3. Methodology of analyzing discursive formations. Analyzing discursive formations requires a meticulous examination of texts and practices across different contexts. Here are steps often taken in this analysis. Collection of data. Gathering a wide array of texts that contribute to the discourse, such as academic articles, books, policy documents, media coverage, etc. Identifying patterns. Looking for patterns in how objects, subjects, and concepts are discussed across these texts. Analyzing relationships. Examining how these elements relate to each other within the discourse and identifying the rules that govern these relationships. Contextualization. Considering the historical and social contexts in which the discourse operates, and how these influence the discursive practices. 4. Implications and applications. Foucault's analysis of discursive formations allows for a critical understanding of how knowledge is structured and how it functions within society. It reveals the underlying power dynamics that shape what is considered true or false, acceptable or unacceptable. This approach is particularly useful in fields such as cultural studies, sociology, and history, where understanding the mechanisms of knowledge production is crucial. The concept of discursive formations provides a robust framework for analyzing the implicit rules that guide discursive practices in various fields. By uncovering these rules, Foucault's methodology helps illuminate the power structures embedded within knowledge itself, offering profound insights into the ways societies think, operate, and govern. This approach remains a vital tool for scholars seeking to understand the complex interplay between language, knowledge, and power. 3. Role of institutions. Michel Foucault's analysis of the role of institutions in shaping and maintaining discourses is a central theme in his exploration of power and knowledge within society. Foucault posits that institutions are not merely passive structures or backgrounds against which societal activities unfold. Rather, they are active agents in the production and regulation of discourses. Through his methodologies, particularly evident in works like Discipline and Punish and The History of Sexuality, Foucault demonstrates how institutions enforce norms, shape behaviors, and construct identities through discourse. 1. The role of institutions in Foucauldian discourse analysis. Institutions such as prisons, schools, hospitals, and psychiatric facilities play a critical role in the formation and perpetuation of discourses. These institutions are imbued with authority and power, enabling them to enforce specific discourses that support their goals and maintain their influence. 2. Key aspects of institutional influence on discourse. Normalization and power. Institutions often use discourses to normalize certain behaviors and values, thereby exercising power over individuals. By establishing what is considered normal, institutions can control what Foucault calls docile bodies, individuals who conform to institutional norms without the need for coercion. For example, educational institutions instill certain modes of thinking and behavior in students, shaping how they perceive and interact with the world. Creation and enforcement of knowledge. Institutions are key sites for the creation and enforcement of knowledge. They determine what knowledge is valid, who is allowed to produce it, and how it is disseminated. This control over knowledge is a form of power that institutions use to maintain and strengthen their positions in society. In the medical field, for example, hospitals and medical schools determine the boundaries of legitimate medical knowledge and practices. Disciplinary practices. Foucault's concept of disciplinary practices refers to the methods institutions use to train individuals to behave in certain ways. These practices are often so ingrained that individuals internalize them, leading to self-regulation. Disciplinary practices include surveillance, examination, and correction, all of which are used to align individual behaviors with institutional goals. Regulation of discourse. Institutions regulate discourse through both formal and informal means. This includes legal regulations, professional standards, and ethical guidelines that govern how subjects can be discussed and treated within the institution. For example, legal institutions shape discourses around justice and law enforcement by defining legal procedures, rights, and the interpretation of laws. 3. Methodological approaches. Foucault's methodologies for analyzing the role of institutions in discourse involve several approaches. Archaeological analysis. This involves examining the layers of historical data to understand how institutions have shaped discourses over time. It looks at the conditions under which institutions emerged and how they have influenced what is considered true or false. Genealogical analysis. Foucault uses this approach to trace the development and transformation of discourses within institutions. It focuses on the origins and changes in the power-knowledge relationships that define institutional practices. Case studies. Foucault often used detailed case studies of specific institutions, e.g., the prison in Discipline and Punish, to demonstrate how they implement and maintain control over discourses. 4. Implications and applications. Understanding the role of institutions in shaping discourses is crucial for analyzing broader societal structures and power dynamics. It allows scholars and critics to question the origins and impacts of the knowledge produced by these institutions and to explore alternatives that might be marginalized or suppressed. In Foucauldian discourse analysis, institutions are seen as powerful actors that shape, maintain, and are in turn shaped by discourses. They are not just passive settings but active participants in the networks of power and knowledge that govern society. This perspective is essential for a comprehensive understanding of how societal norms and truths are constructed and sustained. 4. Archaeological analysis. Michel Foucault's archaeological analysis is a distinctive methodology that he developed to explore the systems of thought and knowledge, discourses, that underpin various epistemes or periods of intellectual culture. Unlike the genealogical method, which focuses on the origin and history of discourses in terms of power and conflict, archaeological analysis seeks to uncover the rules, conditions, and structures that govern discourse formation in different periods, without emphasizing the role of individual agency or broad social transformations. 1. Understanding archaeological analysis. Archaeology, as a methodological approach in Foucault's work, is primarily concerned with the deep, structural layers of knowledge systems. It aims to analyze discourses from a neutral standpoint, focusing on how statements, ideas, and practices conform to certain rules and patterns that define a particular period's way of thinking. 2. Key features of archaeological analysis. Discourse as the primary unit of analysis. Foucault treats discourses as the fundamental units of analysis. Discourses are more than just ways of speaking. They are practices that systematically form the subjects and objects of which they speak. Archaeology looks at discourses to understand the conditions under which they emerge and exist. Rules of formation. The archaeological method seeks to identify the rules of formation behind knowledge and discourses. These rules determine what can be said, who can say it, the concepts used to express it, and the institutions that support its dissemination. Foucault's analysis does not seek to understand the evolution of ideas over time but rather to reveal the underlying principles that make certain types of knowledge possible at specific times. The episteme. Central to Foucault's archaeological method is the concept of the episteme, an underlying set of relations that define the conditions of possibility for knowledge in any given period. This concept is akin to the intellectual framework or structure of thought that underlies the sciences and humanities at a particular historical moment. Avoidance of continuity. Unlike traditional history, which often seeks to trace a continuous development of thought or institutions, archaeological analysis focuses on discontinuities, breaks, gaps, and limits of knowledge systems. It avoids attributing changes in discourse to the actions of individuals or the influence of broader social events. 3. Methodological approaches. To conduct an archaeological analysis, Foucault suggested several steps. Systematic description. Start by describing discourses as they manifest in texts and practices, without resorting to interpretations or judgments about their meaning or value. Analysis of discursive formations. Identify patterns in the discourse that reveal the rules governing the creation of statements and ideas. This includes analyzing the conditions under which statements are made and the status of those who make them. Mapping of relationships. Map out the relationships between different discourses to understand how they influence one another and the overall structure of knowledge during the period. 4. Implications and applications. The archaeological method allows for a deep understanding of how knowledge is structured and legitimized, providing insights into the often unexamined assumptions that underlie scientific and intellectual practices. This approach is particularly valuable in the fields of history of science, cultural studies, and critical theory, where understanding the foundational structures of knowledge is crucial. Foucault's archaeological analysis offers a rigorous method for examining the conditions under which discourses are formed and function. By focusing on the structures that underpin discursive practices, rather than on the agents who produce them or the social contexts in which they arise, archaeology provides a powerful tool for understanding the deeper layers of knowledge and the rules that govern intellectual life. This methodology remains influential for those studying the implicit assumptions and conditions that shape various fields of knowledge. 5. Discursive practice analysis. The methodology of discursive practice analysis within Foucauldian discourse theory focuses on examining the specific practices through which discourses are articulated. This approach emphasizes not just what is said, the content of discourses, but how it is said, under what conditions, and with what effects. Foucault's analysis of discursive practices is deeply concerned with the mechanisms and contexts that allow certain statements to be made while simultaneously excluding others. This approach reveals the material and institutional conditions that shape discourses, thus shedding light on the power dynamics inherent in knowledge production. 1. Understanding discursive practice analysis. Discursive practice analysis investigates the doing aspect of discourse, how discourses operate and are manipulated in everyday practices, how they are maintained, and how they change. It involves looking beyond texts to consider the institutional frameworks, social rituals, and material infrastructures that enable and constrain discursive events. 2. Key features of discursive practice analysis. Institutional frameworks. Institutions play a crucial role in structuring discourses. They provide the rules of the game by setting formal and informal boundaries around what can be said, who can speak with authority, and the contexts in which this speech is appropriate. For example, Academic institutions regulate discourses through peer review processes and academic standards, determining what constitutes valid knowledge. Material conditions. Foucault stressed the importance of the material conditions that enable certain discourses. These include the physical spaces in which discourse occurs, like hospitals, schools, or prisons, the technologies used, such as medical equipment or digital platforms, and other resources that affect how discourses can be produced and received. Rules of exclusion. Discursive practice analysis also looks at how certain statements are excluded or marginalized. Foucault identified several such mechanisms, including taboo, the distinction between reason and madness, and the division between true and false statements. Understanding these rules of exclusion helps in mapping out how power is exercised within and through discourses. Rituals of discourse. The analysis also extends to the rituals that surround discursive practices. These rituals, whether they be in legal, academic, or clinical settings, help to stabilize certain discourses and give them legitimacy. They determine how discourse participants are expected to behave, how arguments are structured, and how conclusions are reached. 3. Methodological approaches. In applying discursive practice analysis, researchers typically engage in several methodological steps. Ethnographic observation. Observing the settings in which discourses take place can provide insights into the practical conditions and rituals that shape discourse. Textual analysis. While the focus is on practice, analyzing texts, documents, transcripts, digital communications is still vital for understanding what is said and how it aligns with or deviates from the norms of the discursive environment. Interviews and fieldwork. Engaging with participants in various discourses can reveal how they understand and negotiate the rules and conditions of their discursive practices. 4. Implications and applications. This methodology is instrumental in fields such as sociology, anthropology, and cultural studies, where understanding the practical operation of discourse is crucial. It allows researchers to explore how everyday practices contribute to the maintenance and transformation of social norms and power structures. Discursive practice analysis provides a robust framework for understanding the complex interplay between discourse and power in social settings. By focusing on the practices and conditions that enable and constrain discourse, this approach offers deep insights into the ways power is exercised and resisted in society. It helps to uncover the often hidden mechanisms through which knowledge and social order are produced and maintained. 6. Analysis of power relations. The analysis of power relations is a central component of Foucauldian discourse analysis, where power and knowledge are not seen as separate entities but as intimately intertwined. Michel Foucault's perspective shifts the focus from power being merely repressive to viewing it as productive and pervasive throughout society. This approach allows us to examine how power dynamics influence discourse and vice versa, elucidating how knowledge both exercises power and is shaped by it. 1. Understanding the analysis of power relations. In Foucault's view, power relations permeate every level of society, influencing how knowledge is produced, circulated, and legitimized. Discourses, systems of knowledge and power that define the truth within a particular society, do not simply reflect power relations but actively participate in creating and modifying them. This analysis involves looking at the interplay between power and knowledge and how this interplay governs the conduct of individuals and the organization of society. 2. Key aspects of analyzing power relations. Power, knowledge. Foucault famously coined the term power, knowledge, to emphasize that power and knowledge are not only co-constitutive but also co-productive. Knowledge is used to exercise power, e.g., through techniques of surveillance, classification, and control, and power relations dictate what can be known and who has the authority to know. Disciplinary power. Foucault introduces the concept of disciplinary power, which refers to the ways institutions, schools, prisons, hospitals, enforce norms and behaviors through subtle means of surveillance and normalization. This form of power is not top-down but rather capillary, functioning at the micro levels of social relations. Biopower. This form of power deals with the regulation of populations, focusing on life processes such as birth, mortality, health, and illness. Biopower is exercised through various institutions and practices, from public health measures to state policies, shaping how individuals think about their bodies and health. Governmentality. Foucault's concept of governmentality extends the analysis of power to the conduct of conduct, how authorities endeavor to shape, guide, or affect the conduct of the populace. This includes everything from laws to norms of ethical self-regulation that define how individuals should act in a society. 3. Methodological approaches. To analyze power relations using Foucault's methodology, researchers might adopt the following approaches. Historical analysis. Tracing the historical development of discourses to understand how power relations have shaped them over time. This can involve genealogical or archaeological methods to explore the emergence and transformation of discourses. Case studies. Examining specific instances where power and knowledge intersect, such as in the functioning of a psychiatric hospital or the implementation of educational reforms, to understand how discourses are enforced and contested. Discourse analysis. Studying the language, practices, and institutional frameworks that produce particular types of knowledge. This involves looking at how certain truths are constructed and the power dynamics that support these constructions. 4. Implications and applications. The analysis of power relations is crucial for understanding the mechanisms of control and resistance within societies. It has practical applications in various fields, including sociology, political science, and cultural studies, where understanding the forces that shape human behavior and social structures is essential. Foucault's methodology for analyzing power relations provides a powerful lens through which to view the relationship between discourse, knowledge, and power. By focusing on how these elements interact to shape societal norms, behaviors, and even identities, Foucault's approach offers deep insights into the dynamics that govern societies. This methodology not only challenges conventional views of power and knowledge but also opens up new avenues for critical engagement with social realities. Conclusion. Michel Foucault's methodologies in discourse analysis offer a comprehensive toolkit for dissecting the complex interplay of language, power, and knowledge within societal structures. By employing genealogical and archaeological methods, Foucault not only explores the historical emergence and rules governing discourses but also highlights the role of institutions and power relations in shaping these discourses. Discursive practice analysis further enriches this framework, providing insights into the material and institutional conditions that enable specific discourses while silencing others. Through these methods, Foucault challenges us to question the origins, authority, and impact of the truths we often take for granted, urging a critical examination of the power dynamics that shape knowledge and societal norms. Frequently asked questions. What is the genealogical method in Foucauldian discourse analysis? The genealogical method in Foucauldian discourse analysis involves tracing the development and history of discourses to understand the emergence and transformations of truth and knowledge. It focuses on the power struggles and conflicts that influence these transformations, revealing how current understandings have evolved. What are discursive formations? Discursive formations refer to the patterns in how objects, subjects, and concepts are discussed across various texts. Foucault uses this concept to identify the underlying rules that define what can be said, who can say it, and the conditions under which these statements are accepted as truth within specific historical periods. How do institutions influence discourse in Foucauldian analysis? Institutions play a crucial role in shaping and maintaining discourses by setting the norms and practices that govern knowledge production and dissemination. Foucault's analysis often focuses on institutions like the media, schools, and hospitals to understand how they propagate specific discourses that maintain their authority and control over knowledge. What is archaeological analysis, and how does it differ from the genealogical method? Archaeological analysis looks at the underlying rules that structure discourses in different periods, focusing on the conditions of discourse formation. Unlike the genealogical method, which explores the historical changes in discourse due to shifts in power, archaeology does not attribute change to individual agency or broad social transformations, instead examining the internal rules of discourse systems. What is meant by discursive practice analysis? Discursive practice analysis examines the specific practices through which discourses are articulated. This includes studying the rules, institutions, and material conditions that enable certain statements to be made while excluding others. It looks at how these practices function in everyday life to perpetuate or challenge power structures. How does Foucauldian discourse analysis investigate power relations? Foucauldian Discourse Analysis investigates power relations by exploring how power dynamics influence discourse and vice versa. This involves examining how knowledge is used to exercise power and how power shapes the production, circulation, and acceptance of knowledge. The analysis looks at how discourses control what can be thought and said and how they organize social life. How can the genealogical method be applied in practical research? The genealogical method can be applied in research by analyzing historical texts, policies, and media to trace changes in discourse over time. Researchers might look at how certain practices or ideas became dominant and the role of power conflicts in these changes, helping to understand contemporary issues within their historical context. Can you provide an example of how discursive formations might be studied? An example of studying discursive formations might involve analyzing medical discourses across different eras to see how concepts of health and disease have shifted. Researchers could examine medical textbooks, public health policies, and media portrayals to identify the changing rules and norms about what constitutes medical knowledge. What are the challenges of using Foucauldian methodologies in discourse analysis? Challenges include the complexity of tracing discourses across different contexts and times, the difficulty of identifying underlying rules without imposing current understandings, and the abstract nature of concepts like power, knowledge. These methodologies require careful historical research and critical analysis to avoid simplifying the intricate relationships they aim to uncover. How does understanding discursive practices help in broader social research? Understanding discursive practices helps in broader social research by revealing the mechanisms through which societies construct and regulate knowledge, identities, and behaviors. It enables researchers to critically evaluate the sources of social norms and power imbalances, providing insights into how social change can be achieved by altering discursive practices.